So this is going to be day 6, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Anything we ought to be talking about before we look at day 6 beeps?
Sort of.
Okay,
So
go for it.
this is a continuation of my ongoing attempt at investigating what happens when I'm sleeping.
Okay.
So I've been doing that almost every night, and in order to try to test or push the limits of whether I really am unconscious or I'm just forgetting what I am thinking of by the time that the beep wakes me up slowly, in those, because until now, those were all cases where I didn't hear the beginning of the beep. And if I heard the beginning of the beep, it was when I was taking a nap and I was always thinking of something at that moment. And but at night, it wouldn't wake me up. And so then by the time it woke me up, I was not aware of experiencing anything. So I turned up the volume to the max, and I've done this now multiple times. And most of those times, except for once where I could tell I was thinking of something, um, yeah, I'm sorry, other way around. Except for once where it did not wake me up right away, and then I was not aware of any experience prior to waking up. But that's analogous to those other cases when the volume was low. Every other time with the volume at the maximum, I heard the beginning of the beep and I was thinking of something at that moment. So I still don't have any case in which I hear the beginning of the beep, like I wake up immediately from the beginning of the beep, but I am not aware of having been thinking of anything prior to the beep. So I thought I would share that. This is partly inspired by your comment last time, Russ, when you said the fact that it takes a while to wake me up could be used as an argument that in that process, in that slow process of waking up, I'm also forgetting what I was thinking about. So far, yeah, this is all consistent with that possibility, I think.
So let me see whether I understand the story here. So if I hear the beginning of the beep,
Oh.
I also think, as best I can tell, trying to be honest about it,
Mhm.
that there was some thought process, some inchoate thought process going on right before the beep.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
which is surprising to me. I expected the opposite, at least some of the time. Um,
So I don't know anything about. I'm not a sleep researcher, but I would say that it's still possible that responding to the beep gives you the opportunity, even if you hear the beginning of the beep, it gives you the opportunity to make it seem that this is sort of the Carruthers argument in general, but applies specifically to sleep, that you can swiftly create something.
yeah, I
And
don't, I mean, yes, from the outside, maybe that sounds like a possibility, but from the inside, that does not seem like a serious possibility.
uh,
What seems like a serious possibility is that there's never a time when I am not thinking of something while I'm sleeping. Um, and that's the opposite of what I was expecting.
so
Because,
I didn't mean to argue against that. I think that's quite possible. Just didn't mean to argue for it either, because I don't really
okay,
know.
okay. Yeah, so what I would say is that I am 100% confident that when the beep wakes me up from the very beginning, or meaning I hear the beep, I hear the beginning of the beep, then I am immediately aware that there's been a train of thought in my mind And so at that moment, I am at least somewhat aware of what the content of the train of thought is and what the thought is at the very moment that I hear the beep. But it fades away, so quickly that typically I don't remember any of it by the time I'm writing notes. Although in some cases I can remember maybe the topic. In one case it was the cleaning of the house. I was in a house that needed to be cleaned, not where I live, not here. So I was very concerned about having to clean all this nasty stuff. And that's what I was thinking about. But that's as far as I can remember. It's a little bit like that time where I could remember that something was impossible, but I couldn't remember what was impossible. So it's a little like that. Like I can remember sort of the topic, but not more specifically, what I was thinking about, like was there something specific that I was worried about cleaning in the house or something like that. And then the other times I can't remember any of it. I just am confident that it was happening on its own right before the beep. And then, the beep wakes me up and then if I try to write it down, it's gone.
So one of the characteristics of these beeps
Mm.
that are waking you up is they would be at the beginning of sleep, relatively speaking, because the beep is only an hour long at the most. At the most, so you're getting a beep 2 minutes or 15 minutes or 29 minutes or 38 minutes or something into being asleep.
Yeah.
So we could figure out a way to get you a longer beep. So I've got ways to do that. There are several different ways that we could get you a later in the a longer interval before the beep. We could talk about whether that's a worthwhile thing to do, and if so, how we're going to do it, because there are several possibilities.
Yeah.
So it could be that you haven't yet gotten into stage 4 deep sleep, which would be totally unconscious sleep in the beginning of sleep. So I'm guessing that there is a sleep literature that interrupts people, and I'm not particularly familiar with it actually, but it interrupts people that sometimes time locked. They observe EEGs or whatever, observing when you're in REM sleep or whatever, and interrupting you in and not in REM sleep, and identifying stages and interrupting it in. I don't know what the characteristics of the interruption are. Wouldn't surprise me if they're not adequate from my point of view, because I think you need a really sudden rise time to minimize the issues that we've been talking about so far. I'm not sure that they take that stuff adequately seriously from my point of view. But I don't really know. Haven't been that interested in sleep, I guess.
Right. No, I agree that this could be fine-tuned with trying to time the beep to correspond to the deepest stages of sleep. I don't think it makes a big difference if it's more than about an hour, because within an hour you are supposed to get into the deepest stages of sleep. And then you go through cycles. So, you get into the first couple of cycles, you're supposed to go into the deepest sleep, and then you don't even go back into the deepest, like stage 4, whatever it's called. You may get to stage 3 in your third cycle, and then that's it. Typically, I think. I'm not an expert either, but
right. I think that's what happens too. But we don't really know much about the onset of the beep so far, because it could be quite quick unless you're recording the time. If you're recording the time of the beeps, that would.
Yeah, I maybe what I could do is I could try to record more precisely when I go to sleep and when the beep occurs. Right now, I'm writing it down, but it's kind of vague, and like I didn't write down exactly when I went to sleep. So,
Right.
yeah, that would be interesting. Yeah, good idea. Good idea. Thank you.
Probably the easiest way to control a beep is to, instead of having the beep come from a beeper, have the beep come from like a laptop. If you got a laptop that you can, and I can give you a way of delivering the beep through an earphone that you would plug into your computer, and the computer basically what it would do is basically it would play a song that ends in a beep, but the beginning of the song is just silence. So we can program it for as long as we want of silence, and then a beep after that.
Yeah.
And so
I
we
agree.
can talk about whether that's worth the effort of doing it. It's not that big a deal. I mean, I've got recorded beeps, and I have done this kind of stuff, but we'd have to determine how random we want to make it. So there are ways that I think that we could probably do that as long as you're willing to play the game. Because
I'd be interested in trying that, and even preferably set the time if it was possible to just set the time of the beeps, at say 45 minutes after I go to sleep, or an hour, maybe try different times.
so are you an Audacity user? Do you do editing and
No.
all right, tell me what you want. You first off, you tell me that you've got a laptop that you can plug an earphone into and hear the beep through
Yes,
that. All right.
I do. I'm using
Then then you tell me what you want in terms of how much silence. So this is basically it's going to be a song that's going to be, if you say 45 minutes long, it's going to
Yeah.
be a song that is 45 minutes and 1 second long or whatever. And then the beep. So then you have to tell me whether you want to have the beep go until you stop it, or whether you want to have, in this case, a time limited beep, a beep that goes for 1 second or 2 seconds or whatever. So you can tell me that, and you can give me a range. I would like a 45-minute one and a 1 hour one and an hour and 15-minute one or whatever.
Yeah, I would like all of that. I would like a 30-minute, 45, 1 hour, 1 hour, 15 minutes.
Okay.
That's probably about it, because I think by an hour and a half, I enter a second sleep cycle.
Okay. And then you want the beep to last for some number of seconds and then stop, or do you want the beep to continue until you turn it off on?
I would let it continue. Yeah, let it continue.
Okay. All right. Then the beep will play back in are you a Windows guy or an Apple guy?
Mac. I have a MacBook.
So if you play a song in your Mac, what app does it use? I'm not a Mac user. All right.
I don't
I'll
know.
figure that out. I'll figure that out. Or I'll send you some beeps and then you can figure it out.
Yeah,
But
probably.
basically it'll start what'll happen is you'll start the song and then you'll go to sleep and the thing will be playing this song, but the song will be silent.
Yeah.
And then after a while it'll beep, and then your task will be to find the computer and turn off whatever app it is that's playing the song back,
Yeah.
which
I
is
can do
probably
that.
just touch the screen
Yeah, touch
touch
the
the space
save
bar or whatever.
button, or touch the pad or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
You'll have to play with that, see what happens. Should happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I will send you a bunch of files, and then you can determine how random to make these things. Like if you've got a partner, or Lauren can do it for you or whatever. She can, you can, if you want to be awakened either at 45 minutes or an hour, but you don't want to know which, then
Mm,
you'd have somebody rename the file for you, and then you would have to not look at the length of the file when you load it. But I think you can figure out how to do that. I'll send you the files, and then you can enlist somebody if you want to rename files to use this one Tuesday night file, and
yeah.
don't tell me how long it is. And
So why would that be important for me not to know? I'm not arguing about it. It's just, since I'm asleep, I presumably will forget about that while I'm sleeping, and not really, it won't affect what stage of sleep I'm in.
I guess it depends on how good a sleeper you are. If you're not a very good sleeper, you could be, well, I'll just stay awake here until I know the beep is coming. I'll just wait here until the beep till the beep happens. But
Yeah.
but
I don't think that's a serious risk. I'm good
okay.
at going to sleep. I'm not as good at staying asleep, but I'm good at going to sleep.
Okay.
And then at the beginning, I'm sleeping very soundly.
Yeah. I a few 10 years ago probably had a sleep study where I went to the Mayo Clinic somewhere, so I had to travel to the Mayo Clinic, and basically they said if you can do this whole sleep study in one night, then you only have to stay one day, and then you can go back, you can go home. But if you don't sleep well, then you got to stay 2 nights. And so I was motivated to sleep one night, and so I was trying to go to sleep, and I couldn't sleep, and I couldn't fall asleep, and couldn't fall asleep, and finally I ring the bell to the worker and I say, I think if I could have some aspirin, if is it legal for me to have an aspirin? If you can give me a couple of aspirin, I'll be able to go to sleep, I think. And she said, well, you can have all the aspirin that you want, but you were asleep 5 minutes after your head hit the pillow, and you just think you haven't been asleep, but the fact of the matter is that you have indeed been asleep. So I'm a believer that people can't tell. Don't that's part of the people don't know their own mental states evidence.
Yes,
So
I've had that experience only during naps though, where I'm trying to go to sleep and I'm staying there and I'm awake, and then at some point I wake up and I'm thinking, wait a minute, I was sleeping this whole time.
well, inner experience is a
Yeah,
slippery deal.
yeah, yeah.
All right, more to be said about that, or sure, I have my marching orders about that, so I'll send you some files and you can do with them what you want.
Yes, sounds good.
And then we've had some comments going back and forth, and I've got more to say. The comment that I wrote about your most recent one, I wrote a reply to that, but in my not sleeping last night, then I thought there was some things that I should have said about that I haven't said. And so that one was about maybe we should pick a presupposition and go with that. I pick a good presupposition and only try to bracket the bad presuppositions. And what I'm going to write about that. So have you read my response to that?
Not yet, no.
All right.
Sorry.
Well,
I haven't.
if you haven't read it, then there's no reason for me to tell you how I would have continued. I will just sometime later on today continue, and then you can read it.
Okay, yeah, yeah. This morning I was, participating in a webinar and I had to prepare for that yesterday. And so then that took my morning. Well, it took much of
Got it.
yesterday and today.
Got it. I'm not complaining. I'm just if you
Yeah.
haven't read the first half, then I won't tell you what the second half is. But what I guess I am saying is I'll send you a updated version that'll have one more paragraph in it,
Sounds
or
good.
one or two more paragraphs in my reply to your most recent comment. All right. Then, does that mean we're ready to talk about beep 6.1?
Yes.
I'm ready.
Okay. So this was yesterday afternoon. I was reading to prepare for this webinar this morning. And at the time of the beep, I felt my visual attention shifting from reading the words formal logical at the end of one line on the page, which was the screen of my computer, to reading the word proof at the beginning of the next line on the far left of the page. So this was written, I think this was my own notes that I was reviewing. That was not part of the awareness, I don't think. But while I was reading, I was shifting the attention, I was shifting my attention from basically one side of the page to the other, and from the words formological to the word proof. I was also trying to think of what else I needed to say about human intelligence versus large language models, which was the topic of that quote and of the topic of the main presentation today, which I was commenting on. I was going to comment on, so I was writing my comments. I had this feeling of searching for information, searching for, what am I supposed to say about this? What I'm going to say about this. Um, so yeah, so there's two parts to the main things I was experiencing, this shifting of visual attention with some awareness of what was on the page, at the beginning and the end of the shifting, and this sense of searching for information about the topic of human intelligence versus large language models.
And are those more or less equal?
Yeah, more or
Okay.
less equal. Yeah.
Well, let's start with the phonological proof. So your attention is shifting. Is that are we talking about visual thing or motor thing or proprioceptive thing or none of the above?
Um,
Or semantic thing? I'm not trying to, I'm just saying I don't understand what you mean yet by visual attention shifting.
I guess as best I can reconstruct, it would be a shift from looking at those words, formal logical, to looking at that next word, proof, considering that, they weren't in sequence one after the other, formal and logical were in sequence one after the other, but they were on one line, at the end of one line, and then the word proof was on the other side. So there was also a movement of the eyes from one side to the other of the page. But I think the dominant aspect of that experience was just the shift from the words on one end to the other word on the other end. Not so much a proprioceptive experience, sense of the shifting of the eyes. Well, it was just more the shifting of attention or reading from reading those two words, formological, to reading the word proof.
So are the words formal logical?
Yes,
Formal?
it's all part of
LOG?
one sentence, formological proof, and the words formological was on one side, at the end of one
Right.
line, and the word proof was
Yeah,
then
I just want to make
beginning
sure I
of,
got the words
yeah,
right. So the words are formal and logical that are put together as an adjective for proof. Formal
yes,
logical proof. Got it. And and so I'm gathering from what you're saying is that my experience is more of visual shifting than a semantic shifting. It's not like I have grasped formal logical and now I'm about to grasp proof or I'm in the midst of that, but it's more I feel my visual attention shifting from formal logical to proof.
yes. I mean, I was also understanding what those words mean. It's not like I didn't know what they were.
Right.
it would have been different if I was reading a language I don't understand. But I was reading something to understand, so I was understanding what they mean, but I
Right.
was also shifting attention from one to the other.
So this, so the distinction that seems to me, which and there are lots of other distinctions too, but the one that was occurring to me was, I think it's possible. I think people very often read without any visual experience at all.
Hmm.
They're obviously their visual processing is processing it because they're doing the reading, but there are a lot of people who just don't pay any attention to that. Like I have a reading study, and most of the people in my study actually just formed visual images of what they were reading and didn't attend to the words or the visual experience at all. They have if they're reading about a castle in Spain, well, they got a picture of a castle in Spain, and
Hmm.
so what I want to be sure is that we're not saying, well, there's a visual thing because there must be a visual experience, because I don't think that's
Yeah.
necessarily true.
Uh-huh. Yeah. There's definitely a visual experience.
Okay. And the visual experiences of the shift.
Well, I wouldn't say that because the shift itself is not visual. The shift is a shift in attention from one side of the page to the other, and from those two words over there to this word over here.
So my experience of this portion of my experience is about seeing the words.
What I'm trying to say is I'm not visually experiencing the shift.
Right.
I am I am experiencing the shift between seeing these two words to this other word. So seeing this other word.
So that's the distinction I'm trying to make as clear as we can get about. So does it seem like I'm seeing the word formological, and then a little bit later, I'm seeing the word proof,
Yes.
and I am describing that as a shift?
Yes.
Or does it seem like I am in some way experiencing a movement from one to the next? And I could describe that as a shift. Or that's or that
Yeah.
question's in the weeds and I just can't.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I probably was also experiencing some kind of movement. I mean, certainly my eyes moved, and perhaps this attentional shift came with some awareness of a physical movement, but that was certainly not prominent in my experience. The way I wrote it down was that it was a shifting in visual attention. So I'm reading this thing, and then I'm shifting to the other side of the page and reading the other side.
And is the to the other side of the page a part of this experience, or is that a statement
Not
of fact?
not explicitly. Yeah, not explicitly. And
Okay.
at least the way I remember it, the way I wrote it down was more just the shift from those two words, which I both, so as far as I can tell, I read those two words together with, because they were next to each other and they sort of go together, formological, and then shift to the other word, proof.
Okay.
So that was the focus, the words themselves, not so much the page or the side of the page.
Okay. And so I think I understand here. So, well, I guess maybe I should say what I understand. What I understand is that at the moment of the beep, I have taken in the word, I've visually taken in the words formological, and I'm in the process of about to take in, or maybe this has just happened. I'm not 100% sure about that, but then later, somewhat later, microsecond later, I'm going to take in the word proof, and I grasp myself as first this and then that.
Yes.
And the fact is that they're on one side of the page and the other side of the page, and that may contribute to this stuff, but it's not like I'm experiencing myself as directly moving from one side of the page to the other. And what I would say about that, the eye movements, we're saccading all the way, all the time. Our eye movements are moving. We never pay attention to that. So we got 20 saccades or however many there are per second, and we don't feel any visual vibration, even though our eyeballs are doing it. And so there doesn't have to be, and probably isn't most of the time, a muscular or proprioceptive view of reading. Maybe there is, but not very often. So we good about that portion? Sound like I understand. And then the other part is I am in some way pondering what I should say. What is there to say? And the content is easily transmittable in this interview. It has something to do with what's the difference between human intelligence and LLMs. And so is that content directly present at the moment of the beep, or is it the fact that I'm trying to think about something, I'm receptive to something, and then
Yes. It's more, that's the context or the topic, But the experience is more of searching for information about that or searching for what I want to say about it, gathering thoughts, sort of, it's like, you're like pulling thoughts out of your brain kind of a thing. Or at least trying to, because, I got interrupted and
But so what I'm gathering for that is my experience is more of pulling thoughts or being available to thoughts
yeah,
or whatever without so much being available, having a directly experience that it's about human intelligence and large language models. That is the topic.
right.
That
So
is
that's
what I'm going to.
that's what I'm looking for thoughts about, but it's not the content of the thought, really, or the experience. The content of the experience is more the sense of grasping for the thought, like it's I guess an analogy would be when um when you're looking for something, you're like I don't know, you need the keys to the car and you don't know exactly where they are, and so you just go around and go, okay, where are they? Where are they? So you're trying to find the information somewhere in your mind.
Got it. And the concept of keys is not necessarily directly present. I'm looking at the places where I frequently leave my keys. I'm looking there. And if I see my keys, that'll solve my searching dilemma.
Right,
But it's not
right,
like I'm saying keys or thinking keys or seeing a picture of keys
right.
or
But
whatever
you
while I'm
know
doing
what
it.
you're looking for, but you're not necessarily like
Right.
focusing on that,
Right.
explicitly.
I'm more into the looking than the for
Yeah,
of what I'm looking.
yeah.
All right. And I think I'm good about that unless there is anything else going on in this experience or if Lauren has a question.
And it's fascinating, like side note, because I don't think that is quite the way large language models themselves work. They don't have this internal process of like, oh, like let's see if I can think of something like that, but like you're just searching for the information inside. Not an expert on large language models, but from the little I know.
Well, I've been thinking for quite a while that the absolute antithesis of large language models is pretty much DES.
Yeah.
That what we're doing here is 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 exactly the opposite thing of large language models.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Large language models are predicting what people would say regardless of what experience is. And
Yes.
we here, I think, are trying to figure out what experience is without caring what the words are.
Right.
That's the words are entirely non-important to me. It's the
Yeah,
experience.
exactly. And a lot of times there are these spontaneous experiences or thoughts or trains of thought. Some of them are expressible linguistically. Some of them are, maybe you can try to describe some aspects of them linguistically, but they don't have to be linguistic in nature. And also they are spontaneous. They're not just like, we're just going to predict the next word in a sequence. We're just have like thoughts bubble up in our mind.
Right. I agree.
That's definitely a common experience, at least, using DES.
Right.
So yeah.
So sooner or later, you or I or both of us or all three of us or whatever are going to have something to say about this because I do think it's of relatively fundamental importance.
Yeah.
And it really it goes to the heart of DES from my point of view because what DES is about is trust and fidelity and and to trying jointly with honesty or genuineness or whatever you want to call it to describe a phenomenon. And the LLMs are just exactly the opposite of that.
Mhm.
And the LLM is all about the L, the first L, or both L's actually. And DES is about neither one of those things. DES is about you and me. It is not about you and me averaged across 2 million billion, however many there are out there in those language models.
Yeah.
And so I haven't put my thoughts about that together, but it's an important deal.
Yeah.
Number two.
Number two happened while I was almost finishing writing my notes about the one that I just described. It only happened 3 minutes after the other one. So I was staring at my notebook on the empty spot right after the acronym LLMs. Um, so I was trying to formulate the next phrase, which was a clarification on what I was experiencing in my previous, um, before my previous, with the previous beep. And so I beeped again. And so part of the experience was just staring at the blank part of the page after LLMs written on the page while trying to formulate the next phrase that would sort of clarify what I meant. So in some ways it's similar. There's a visual experience, but it's just the blank part of the page and also this sense of searching for information.
So let's start with the visual experience. So I would like us to distinguish between my eyeballs are aimed at this blank part of the page as a fact of the universe that anybody could see. If I had been there next to you, I could have seen your eyeballs aimed at the page.
Yeah.
And I am experiencing the blank part of the page. I am seeing the blank part of the page.
Yeah. So it's the second one.
It's the second one. So you,
Yeah.
okay. And is there anything more to be saying about that other than I'm seeing it as far as my experience is concerned?
Mhm.
I understand that in the state of the universe and in the state of Gualtiero's intention, he wants to put something in there. I understand
Yeah.
that's what's happening. But as far as the visual experience is, I am seeing a space.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, of course it's surrounded by other, the rest of the page. So there's like this, the rest of the page is in the weeds, as you say, but
But not necessarily experientially. That's the question. So the question is the rest of the page there experientially.
in the weeds.
Okay. And so maybe we've talked about this before, but you know the faces base
Yeah.
ambiguous figuring.
Hmm.
When you see the faces, the base is gone for most people.
Yeah.
You wouldn't say it's in the weeds. You would say, well, it's just not there. I'm seeing faces. And
Yeah.
then when you see in the vase, it's like, well, the faces are gone. And people wouldn't say, well, most people wouldn't say the vase is gone.
Right.
So that's the difference between in the weeds and I just don't think I experience it. But also in the weeds it says I really can't make that distinction. I'm happy with that too.
Yeah.
So
Well,
what I'm trying to do is to get us to be as good as we can do about that without being better than we have a right to be.
right.
And,
Yeah. Um, yeah. I don't think I can be super precise, but the best I could say is there's still some minimal fading awareness of the rest of the page or part of the page surrounding that blank area. Um, but it's outside of the my attentional focus, my visual focus. So it's not dominant.
okay. And then I am trying to formulate the next phrase. And is there anything that's different from the previous beep where I was trying to have something to say about large language models?
Yeah. Well, there's a difference. Well, there's a difference in the specific goal. There's a similarity in the sense of searching for information, but in one case, I'm searching for kind of general thoughts about the general topic of LLMs versus the human intelligence, whereas in the other case, I am I'm actually trying to clarify the content of the beep, so I am looking for something that would clarify that. So I'm maybe holding some information present in my working memory, let's say. I know this is theoretical talk, but I'm probably I'm probably actively, like rehearsing the content that I just wrote down and trying to find a way to clarify what I was trying to say about it. And the phrase that I came up with was searching for information. And then I wrote that down. But I hadn't found it yet when the beep, and I heard the beep.
So the way that I hear what you just said is basically something like the both of these examples, 6.1 and 6.2, involve awaiting information, searching for information, trying to get information, something like that. But the difference and there are differences. There are theoretical differences. I'm searching for different things, and there's. But the experience, as far as I can tell so far, and this is a question, that the experience seems like the first beep is a more open-ended or amorphous searching, whereas this searching seems more pointed or focused. Is that right?
Yeah, and it it's it seems like it's more directly um, based on information that is in a sense actively present to me, even though it's not the explicit focus of that one experience, but it's also there in the background, and that's what I'm trying to think about. Like I have this information there that I'm looking to clarify, as opposed to just a general topic where I'm looking for something to say about that.
So it's the beep two experience is more anchored, more
Yeah.
experientially anchored,
Hmm.
whereas the beep one is more trolling for whatever might come up. This is
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Then I think I'm good. Number three.
Number three was a very diffuse experience um, with a lot of things kind of being in the experience at the same time. I was hearing the letter S, or the sound S, at the end of the word sbaglios. This is one of my made up pseudo-Italian words when I talk to my dog. Um, so I was talking to her, and I was saying that word, and at the end of the word is an S sound, and that's the sound that I was aware of, uttering and hearing at the moment of the beep. But I was also aware of doing a crunch while listening to a workout video and playing with cinnamon and seeing part of my living room around me. And I don't think that there's like any one of those that were much more prominent than the others. It was sort of a whole bunch of things that at least that's how it seemed to me, that I was sort of aware of all these things to about an equal degree.
Okay. Well, let's start with the first one. So I'm hearing the S in walrus.
Well, yeah, the word is
What?
sbaglius. It's a
Uh,
it's a sort of made up Italian pseudo word.
okay. How should I?
So sbaglio without the S, without a U, with ending with an O, means mistake in Italian, but I was using this like modified word that I made up.
So how should I spell this modified word here? It just says,
Sbaglius.
okay. And my experiences of the S sound.
Yeah.
And does that mean that at the moment of the beat, my experience is not of the entire word, but of the S sound of the word?
Yes.
And
Primarily, primarily it's that's S. I think it beeped right after the S. So I stopped talking at that point. I had time to finish the word, but not say another word.
so that's the question that I'm trying to figure out how to ask fairly, which is, does it, and is it the case that I have said Sbalius,
Mhm.
and now I am hearing that word, or is it the fact that I have said Sbalius and I am hearing the S that happens to have been
Yeah,
the end of
I'm
that word?
hearing the S. Yes. Primarily, I'm just hearing the S at the end of the word, and the word itself is directed at cinnamon. So I'm also feeling the directness of the word at cinnamon, but mostly I'm hearing the sound S as opposed to the whole word. I mean, I heard the whole word. It's just that by the time of the beat, the S was more present at that moment.
So that's the distinction that I want us to be clear about, as clear as we can be. So does it seem like I'm hearing the end of the word, which happens to be an S, or does it seem like I am hearing an S, which happens to be at the end of the word, but that's not really the important part of my experience?
No, I guess I would say the first one. So it's the S at the end of the word that I'm hearing.
Okay. So now the skeptic in me, which I got a lot of skeptics that I multi-process here, but one of my multi-processing skeptics says at the outset he was saying it was pretty much into the S, but now he's saying, well, it's pretty much into the word. And so what to make of that? And the answer might be, well, the theory has overtaken the experience, and so it has turned into the word. That's one explanation. Another explanation is, well, the first description was slightly inapt, and when he has refined it, then it becomes more about the word. And I don't know the answer, and it wouldn't surprise me if you don't know the answer. And so the conversation that we're having right now is not so much about this experience, about this beat, but about next time or whatever. Because I think it is an important distinction to be made. Like I'm sampling with a guy right now who I'm pretty sure pays particular attention to pieces of words. He takes it's he's fairly unusual in this regard, but what his word I think is called, he latches onto. So he's listening to a podcast or whatever, and a word has gone on, and he has latched onto that word, which means he has pulled this word out of the sequence and he's holding on to it while the rest of the words keep on going. And most of the time, that word is the last word in the sentence, but it's not always the last word in the sentence. And that's sort of the distinction that we're making here, it seems to me. Is it the last sound in the word, or is he interested in that sound because he's interested in that sound, not because it's the last sound that he has heard? And I don't think we're in a position to answer that. And what we are in a position to do is to raise the possibility that those are two different things, while we simultaneously raise the possibility that Russ is on a wild hair here and doesn't really matter. But that's the That is what the experiential aim is. So the difference, to try to return to the present situation here, the difference is this primarily a sensory experience where I am sensorially aware of the S sound, or is this more a semantically grasping the word for whatever quasi-Italian meaning it has, and I am, as I grasp that word, I get, it's the end of that word that I'm grasping, and therefore the S is a portion of the semantic processing.
Yeah, I would say it's more of a sensory motor experience, but it comes with the knowledge of the whole word that just came before it. So even the whole word was a sensory motor experience, experience uttering and hearing the word. And at the end of the word, I hear the beep. So at that moment, I was more aware of the S because that was the sound that came just before the beep.
So to rewind a few more minutes, in my metaphor of the faces and the vase,
Mm-hmm.
the faces are the word, and the vase is the S sound. And I could be paying attention to the word as one way of looking at this thing, or I could be paying attention at the S sound as another way of looking at this experience. And the question is, at the moment of the beep, which one is it? The first question is whether that question makes sense, and then if it does make sense, which one is it? And I don't expect us or even want us to answer that question about this experience. What I want us to do is to recognize that if we're trying to be fidelity, trying to get to the fidelity of Gualtiero's experience, we might have to make that kind of distinction. Or maybe Russ is barking down the wrong tree, barking up the wrong tree, trying to mimic our president. Okay, so we'll leave that one. Then I'm doing a crunch and listening to the workout video.
Yes.
And that's to some degree in my experience, but not the only thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I am playing with cinnamon beyond the saying of that. So the saying of Sibelius is part of that playing, but not the entire thing.
Yes. Yes. So I'm talking to her while I'm also playing with her with my hand. She's, I don't remember exactly what was happening at that moment of the beat, but we were playing and I was aware of playing with her.
And
Because she comes, when I'm like working out on the ground, like if I'm doing crunches, for example, she will come there and start, brings the toy. She wants to wrestle with the toy with me. And so, while I'm crunching, I'm also like holding one side of the toy and she's pulling, things like that. But I don't remember if that's what was happening, but it's probably something like that.
And that is occupying a portion of my inner experience, but not the primary portion, but not nothing either.
Right.
And then I'm also seeing the living room.
Yes.
And the distinction I want to make there is between my eyeballs are aimed at the living room, so therefore I must be seeing it, or I am somehow experiencing it.
Yes. I'd say I'm experiencing the living room, part of the living room, whatever portion is in my visual field.
And the distinction there is, while we've been talking and you've been trying to explain things or whatever, most of the times when I'm looking at you, I'm totally trying to figure out what Gualtiero is saying, and I'm totally into Gualtiero. But now when I'm broadening my perspective, I can see the face on the wall and the rafters and whatever, and those have no doubt been on my retina equally all the way along here. But I would say that most of the time, when I'm trying to figure out what Gualtiero means when he says Sibelius or whatever, I'm not even in the slightest of paying attention to the antlers, even though they're clearly there to be seen.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that So theoretically, I would say I'm always processing the antlers. They're in my field of vision. But experientially, I think we'd have to beat me and see. But my guess is that if you beat me while I was trying to figure out what Gualtiero was meaning when he was saying Sibelius or whatever, so I had destroyed the antlers. They were gone.
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing, but I don't really know. And that's why the whole thing is why the DES process has to be iterative, and why we have to learn how to talk about these things, because we've got we have to refine our ability to pay attention, get good at getting what's in attention right then, because there's really no second chance. Second chance gets infected by theories or whatever. But I think I'm good about this beep, and it's 1:59. Do we want to look at another beep, or do we want to say we contracted for an hour and
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anything like super crucial in the other few beeps that I had. One was from last night, and I already kind of talked about that at the beginning. So I think we can stop.
All right. Shall we do this again?
Yeah.